All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get going. I know I saw some of you have been to some of the sessions before. Some of you, most of you are new though. So I just wanted to real quick touch on a couple things. First of all, my name is Mike. I'm with Adobe, hence the Adobe logo, sports attire. And then Donna Caldwell is really the show today. She's the system specialist and really knows and all these great products that she's going to talk about at all the Adobe days this week.
All right, hello everybody. We got a big crowd today for this. Awesome. All right, I'm going to move to Illustrator, and we are discussing Illustrator as it applies to infographics. So I just want to say a few words about infographics. Infographics are used to help individuals visualize numbers, right? Statistics. And the more engaging we can make that, the more descriptive we can make it, the better our audience is going to be able to understand what those numbers mean to whatever audience it is. So one of the reasons infographics are done predominantly in a program like Illustrator is because you want to be able to scale that infographic up and down as much as you want without losing resolution. And Illustrator is a vector editing program, which means that all the objects are basically made up of mathematical algorithms, right? So it doesn't matter what printer you send a vector image to, that image prints at the highest resolution that that printer can print. Where if you were to pull a photograph and you tried to expand it really big, those pixels get further and further away from each other, and that's why you see not anymore, our iPhones and our other phone devices have great cameras, but a long time ago, those phone images were just too low a resolution to blow up to anything like an 8.5 by 11 or poster. So I've got here some examples of some infographics, and these are just, they're not specific to anything, but you can see how engaging these are. They're using color, they're using not just bar charts, but they're using other types of indicators to help someone understand what this is about. And I think with this, not even having titles, just looking at one of these infographics, your mind is already going, oh, I could see that this is about, you know, what? Travel in different countries. Or one of the ones that I really like here is this. Obviously this has to do with people. Is it people resources? Is it medical? Is it the job market between men and women? Is it pay differences? Whatever the case may be, right? And I don't even have any text here telling me what it is. So what I want to talk about in relation to Illustrator are a couple of things. One, you do not have to be an illustrator to create icons for infographics. All you have to do is think about shapes. We have this tool inside of Illustrator. Let me get to my samples here. If I was to try to draw this icon for solar, right? This is what this is for. It would take quite a bit for me to make sure that these were all equal sizes. I had the distances right, even if I was using the pen tool, and even if I was a good illustrator. But we don't have to do that without even knowing anything about the pen tool, which is the main drawing tool inside of Illustrator. All I have to do is think about shapes. So I know that there is a circle and a star. And between the two of those, I could overlap them and I would have a solar, and I could do a lot more. So what we're going to do is just draw some of these very simple shapes. You can get an idea of how we can combine these using a very powerful tool called the Shape Builder. And we can come up with some fun things here. If a grid helps you visualize something, you can go to the View menu and just turn on Show Grid. And sometimes when you're building objects and you zoom in, it's easier to just use that grid as a background. Now, if that is confusing to you, some people see a grid and they just go, no thank you, I've never liked grid paper. Then don't turn it on, and you don't need it. It's up to you. It's a personal preference. All right. When you are building icons for any kind of an infographic, often we want those icons to have the same similar size so they work together in a larger chart or a larger environment. So you need to determine what size you're going to start with. And sometimes it's just a matter of taking a 1.5 inch box. So if anybody wants to grab their rectangle tool over here in their tool panel, and if any of you see a single column, that is completely personal. You can have 2 columns or a single column by clicking in that upper right-hand corner of your tool panel. And instead of dragging a rectangle, I'm just going to hold down my Option key. And did anyone with a PC walk in today? Yes. Or that's going to be Alt-click or Option-click. And then you can define how large you want that object. Any object that is a drawing tool in Illustrator, if you hold down the Option or the Alt key and click, you can then define what size you want. So I'm going to type in 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. And if inches is your default measurement system, you don't even have to put the IN. Now, I don't want that box interfering with what I'm doing, so what I'm going to do is just adjust it by placing it on that grid, the top corner. If I'm using a grid, if I'm not using a grid, this is no big deal. And then I'm going to go to the View menu and choose Guides, Make. And now that is a guide, not really a rectangle. And I can lock it by going to my Object menu and choosing Lock. And now it won't move around and I won't accidentally get selected, which is kind of nice. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit on that rectangle that's now my guide. And I'm going to go back to my Tools panel, hold that rectangle down, and all those other drawing tools are going to pop up. We have a lot of drawing tools in Illustrator that are just basic shapes, nothing complicated. I'm going to grab that ellipse tool, and I'm going to move around here until I get close to the center, and I'll see a little tooltip or a little pop-up telling me that my cursor is now over the center. When you draw anything, this is a rule really across almost every Adobe application where you have a drawing tool. If you drag, right, we'll just do this as drawing 101 in any basic shape, and actually this often goes to other manufacturer software too. So this is an ellipse, and I control the size of the ellipse, but notice it gets drawn from the corner I put my mouse button down to where I'm going to. So if I was trying to center this in this box, that's not very easy. The other thing is I want a perfect circle. I don't want an ellipse. Well, that's easy. If you hold down the Shift key with any tool, it makes that object proportional. Rectangle becomes a square. Ellipse becomes a circle. But it's still not letting me draw from the circle. So I'm going to undo that, find that center again, and this time I'm going to hold down two keys. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, which is the same on the PC and the Mac, and I'm also going to hold down the Option or the Alt key because that's going to let me draw anything I want to draw from the center out. So as I draw, you see how that's being drawn from the center. I'm going to bring that down just a little bit so that I have room for my sun flare on the outside. And then I can decide, do I really want a fill or a stroke? So let's just review this tool very quickly for those of you who have not worked in it. How many people here have never worked in Illustrator? Okay, that's definitely worth talking about. So in the Tools panel, we have this box and like a square bagel. If you click on any portion of either one of those, notice that it comes to the front. So I click on some portion of the square box and it comes to the front. And that means that whatever color I choose, it's going to be applied to the fill of whatever object I have selected. So in this case, it's white. But if I go over to my swatches or to my color panel here, you can just click out to get an RGB color here. Let's just say I choose this blue. Now it has a black stroke. It's just hard to see because it's not very wide. But does everyone see that black stroke? I'm going to bring the stroke to the front. And now whatever color I choose is going to be applied not to the fill, but to the stroke. I'm going to go over here and choose, let's say, a gold. Now in this case, I don't want a fill, but I'd like a black stroke just temporarily. So I'm going to click on black for my stroke, going to go back, bring that fill forward, and the symbol for none, again, in almost every Adobe application, is white with a red slash through it. That just means none. Okay. All right, now I'm going to go back to my selection tool, click to deselect that. And again, I'm going to zoom in on that circle a little bit, making sure that I have a little bit of padding around that box so I can see what I'm doing. And now we're going to go down and choose a really fun tool. This is the star tool, which at first doesn't seem too exciting until you find out all of its wonderful hidden features. With the star tool, Notice that the arms are angled without the Option key, but if I hold down the Option key, then they become straight horizontal arms. So that's two different types of star looks that you can choose. And here's the really cool part about this. If you keep your mouse button down, don't let go, while your mouse button is down or your finger is on your pad, use your up arrow key and you get more arms or fewer arms. So one of the best kept tips is when you want to draw a triangle, use the star tool and go down until you only have 3. Triangles are very difficult to draw, actually. For a very simple object, it's really hard to get a triangle that is equilateral. And so I'm holding my Shift key down to make sure that I have 3 equal legs there. But that's not what I want for my sun. Several more of these. Now, one more fun thing about this. When I get the number of arms that I want, if I hold down my Command key or my Control key, the center of the star stays the same, but I can change the distance of the arms. And be careful if you go too big, because sometimes it's hard to back up out of that. And I think I want my sun to have that like that. Okay? And I should have drawn that in the circle, and I didn't, so I want to show you another thing we can do if you happen to draw something outside of that. So I'm just going to drag it into the center, and I will resize it in just a minute. But right now what I want to do is make sure that this star is perfectly aligned with that circle. And visually, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to drag across both of these. Both objects are selected. But I don't want the circle to move. I'm sure anything you guys have ever tried to align before, if you say align centers, they both kind of come together to align. But what I want to have happen is I want that star to align to the circle. So I'm going to touch the circle one more time. So first you select both, then you reselect the circle, and that now has a blue line around it. And that means that it is now the key object. Any alignment command I apply here is going to keep this stationary, and this will align to it. And I can just go right up to the top of my control panel, click on vertical centers and horizontal centers. Centers, sound like I was saying centers, centers. And I know that they're aligned. So I'm going to deselect, click on my star, and use those same keys that I was using to make sure that it was being drawn from the center. So Option Shift or Alt Shift, and I'm going to stretch this out, let it go just beyond or right on that outer circle. Now, depending on how I want to fill this or stroke it, I can get lots of different effects. For example, I could fill the center with a, let's see if I've got any gradients here. They're already made. With a gradient, I could then fill the outer with maybe a yellow. Now, the star is on top, right, of the circle, so I'm just going to right-click, go down to Arrange, and Send to Back. That was a command that I did not figure out the first time I ever used Illustrator. I kept looking for Send to Front, Send to Back, and it was under an Arrange menu. So, in case anyone else is having that same problem. I might also get rid of the stroke. That might be a little bit more pleasant to see, right? Another thing I can do to just add complexity or to add more interesting things is I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it in back. And now when I make this larger, and I change the fill on this, maybe a little bit oranger. Oh, got that backwards. Nope, that's not what I wanted. I wanted no stroke, and I wanted my fill to be the gradient here. Let's go with a real light. There we go. I'm going to bring that up just a little bit bigger. Now, I could have also done this with a thicker stroke, too. I could have just taken that yellow star, right, and added a stroke around it. There's lots of different options I can use. And if I zoom out now, I've got an infographic for solar something. If you go up, I want to talk just a moment about putting together this infographic from more of a research standpoint. When you want to give a message, and it's got to be done with numbers, make use of the web. Go up and look up anything you can find about what that is about. Let's just talk about wind power. I'm using that in a couple other demos for other applications. I want to talk about the statistics of wind power, let's say, in the world. I want to compare the United States versus some other countries. Go find out what that information is. Get your story together. Sketch out your ideas. What is going to be the message I'm trying to portray? Then go up and just Google infographics or symbols for such and such. And what you're going to find is there are already established several almost like international symbols for these things. And look and see what is appealing to you and what's not. And it's very easy to build these. All right. I want to get into the shape builder, but to do that, I'm going to just have everybody do a really quick building block exercise. So I'm going to grab this rectangle tool and just drag out a rectangle. And then I want you to drag several more, intersecting them. It doesn't have to match mine. This can be any configuration you want. And then whatever I've drawn out, I'm going to give it a fill of none and a stroke of black, because it's the easiest to see this happen if you do that. Okay? Anybody who's following along, I'll give you a couple more seconds to get some of these. All right. Now let's talk about this shape builder tool. This tool was so exciting when it was developed. So many people went crazy over it because it really made the difference in how you were going to be able to build these objects. Before, if you wanted to combine two objects, for instance, let's say I had this square and I had this square, and I wanted to combine the two objects together. I do have the option of using something called a Pathfinder, but it would have taken multiple steps to do this. And if anybody's ever interested in this, you can see that it says unite. That's going to combine the two shapes completely, right? Then we've got minus front, the intersect, and then exclude. So if I gave this a fill now, you'd see that it would exclude that center. So Shape Builder does a very similar thing, except it lets you dynamically drag around. So everybody go over here to the tools on the left. Let me get my, oops, that's not the one I want. Nope, and I don't want that one. There it is. Sorry. It's up a little bit further than I thought. If you have a live paint bucket or a live paint selection tool, just hold that down, and the tool we're looking for is the one on top. It's two ellipses with a little arrow, and let's just start building this shape. If you drag across any area of intersecting objects, and this is the trick, where are those intersecting lines? That's what it's using to decide what it's going to combine. It has now combined those into a single unit. And then I can add this, and I'm holding down my shift key. But what if I want to exclude something from this? Let's say that I do want this larger square here, so I'm going to drag into there, but, and maybe I want that to be included too. If you hold your Option or your Alt key, it punches it out. So let's see what happens now with this. If I fill this, and I get rid of the stroke here, looks like that didn't grab it all the way, so let's try that again. Maybe it didn't. Maybe I drew that without intersecting it. Let's see. So I moved my rectangle. As you can see, I cheated and moved it over here. These can be circles, all kinds of things. Now that's how I created this one here. And I'm going to use that just real quickly as an example, just because a lot of times we're creating pie shapes or portions of circles. So knowing how to divide that up real easily, knowing how to knock out that center is really helpful. So let's switch to the ellipse tool. And then I want to get us moving on to something else. So I'm going to just quickly draw that circle. And again, I'm going to give it a fill of none just so we can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to draw a straight line right across the middle of this. Okay. Holding down that shift key is going to make sure that that line is absolutely straight. I also want to be sure that these two are aligned horizontally and vertically. With the line selected, I'm going to grab a different tool. This is the rotate tool. And instead of clicking and dragging, which sets that rotation point, every time you click, it sets the rotation point. I'm going to, I think I just undid my, hang on, I think I just undid my alignment. All right. So with my rotation tool, I'm going to Option or Alt-click right in that center. And I know I want 6 pieces, and we know that that one line is dividing this pie into 2. So I need 2 more of these lines, but I don't know what the degrees should be to do that. So I'm going to type 360, because we all know that a circle is 360 degrees, divided by 3. And instead of clicking OK, which would rotate it, I'm going to copy it. And then by pressing Command D again, I can do that exact same transformation one more time. And now I've got my equal pies. I'm going to select that circle again, copy it, and I'm going to again paste either in front or back. But I'm going to hold down that Option Shift key, and I'm going to bring it in to create an inner circle. And maybe one more. All right, now we look like we have an archery target. But this is really fun to play with something like this because you get a really nice response as to how that shape builder tool is working. With that tool selected, on this side I'm going to combine these two. On this side I'm going to combine those 3, these 2, these 3, these 2, and these 3. And then what I want to do is I'm going to knock out these 3 pieces so that it's going to be hollow. So that Option or Alt click, click, click. And then I want to get rid of these outer pieces just by sliding over them. All right, let's see how this looks with a fill. And I'm going to get rid of that stroke. And now I would not have been able to draw that anywhere near as quickly as I could just by thinking in terms of shapes. So because you guys all have access to lynda.com, Morty Goldman is he works for them now, but he has been doing recordings for a really long time, and he is just this amazing Illustrator guru, and he has an entire entire course on infographics with Illustrator, and many of the things that we're doing today is right out of his course. And he also has some on building objects with shapes. He has this great one where he does a zebra, this really cool zebra, just by putting shapes together. He doesn't once use the pen tool. It's really neat. And it just gives you a whole different idea of what you can do with Illustrator, which is really nice. All right. InDesign, a very long time ago, implemented a graphing feature. And they haven't done anything with it since then, but it really comes in handy for infographics because it allows you to substitute icons that you build for the graph. So you see on the left, I have a very simple line chart, and on the right, I have a very simple bar chart. And last class, someone said, how did you even get those? Because I skipped that part. So I'm going to take just a moment and show you how you can do that. We have this graph tool, and we have 9 different graphs. So I'm just going to quickly do a column graph tool chart. This is not as sophisticated as Excel with all the different things you can do, but what you can do is either use it as an interactive graph where you're updating the number information, or break it apart, get those sizes that you need, and then completely do something different. And Morty actually goes through that in his infographic one. So I'm just going to quickly draw the size of the graph that I want. I'm going to put in the numbers, and yesterday somebody brought in about the callouts for the columns. So if you put the names across the top, it creates a legend. But if you put them here, let's say fill, stroke, padding. Right. And then I put my numbers here, so let's just go 10, 20, 30. Let's go 40 because I messed that up. All right, I'm going to go over here and do 10, 15, 35. And let's do one more bar, 46, 35, and 24. Okay, once I have my numbers in, and by the way, you can import information from Excel. If you use this button here, all you need is a data file. I'm going to click this checkbox. Every change you make, you need to apply it with this check. And now I've got my bar chart. And if I wanted something a little bit easier, let's just do this. And I click apply. You can see that those are interactively changing. Now I can go in here and I can change the color of these. You're going to need to use your direct selection tool because your selection tool is going to select the whole thing. And I can change the fill of these if I choose the right tool here. And it's still interactive. If I go back to my data, which by the way, I can always get back to if this gets closed, that was a question that came up yesterday, I can always go to my object menu, go down to graph, and choose data, and that same data file comes back open. But let's change this from 40 now to 55. And apply that. You can see that my whole chart adjusted. So even though I'm changing colors, as long as I don't expand it, I don't break it apart out of its group, it will still respond to those numbers. So that's how I got to here. Once I got to here, I wanted these, this was for wind power. So I wanted my bar chart to be this turbine. And to implement that, you just create the icon. You make sure that it's selected for the bar, and then you go up to the design portion and you give it a name. You say new design, rename it, and away you go. Now here's where this can be kind of ugly, right? So if I say column, now I'm going to apply it. So to design it, I use design. To apply it, I use column. And let's see, I'm going to choose turbine bar. But if I scale it, watch what happens. That's not working for me. You know, none of them look like they're the same shape, right? So I'm going to undo that, go back, and actually I can do this through right-clicking too. And I'm going to choose that again, but this time I'm going to repeat each of the little turbines, one on top of the other, which is kind of cute, but it needs to know how many units is one turbine going to represent. I'm going to make each one about 10 units. Of course, that's completely customizable, and it's allowed to scale the design for this. I click OK, and now I've got these little cute turbines, one on top of the other. All right, but lastly, what I'd really like is the turbine to stretch, but not modify the top. So here's a little trick for that. When you have your icon, if there is a place that's appropriate for it to stretch, and to me it's right here where this little light blue line is, I don't care if it stretches that. I just don't want it modifying my rotor, right, my top portion. So just draw a line across. In fact, let me just duplicate this and show you. I'm going to draw a horizontal line, and we've already done this with our box. I'm going to convert that line to a guide. So view, guides, make. And now when I define it, just be sure that that guide is selected with it. And that's telling Illustrator, all right, I'm allowed to stretch this and just repeat whatever that guide is on. It actually doesn't stretch it, it just repeats it over and over again to fill in the space. So now if I click on my chart, let's take a look at that setting. Turbine bar, but this time instead of vertically scaled, I want sliding. Maybe not the most intuitive word, but think about that. It's that little marker is going to be sliding. And I click OK, and that's what I was looking for. Now the marker is slightly different. So any chart that uses bars, this is how you're going to do it, whether that's a stacked bar, all the different bars that you have. In fact, I think the pie is going to be that way too. But anything that has little markers, these are these little dots here, what you're going to do is grab one of these markers. I'm going to need my direct selection tool to do it. I'm going to copy it. Oh, and option click, just to be sure you get all parts of that, because some of it's not visual. And I'm seeing that I'm getting other parts. So make sure that none of the rest of the chart is not highlighted. Copy it, paste it, and now I'm going to use my selection tool, make sure it has no stroke and no fill, especially if I don't want it to be seen. And then I make sure that I align these two. So I'm going to select these, center them, and here's the last part that's the most important. Make a special note of this, okay? That little clear marker has to be in back. I cannot tell you how many times I've messed up my chart, because if it's in front, it shrinks the icon to the size of that little square, and you're going, okay, I have little microscopic propellers, and it's just not working for my infographic. So make sure that you select it, arrange, and send to back. Now, when you design this, you choose the design command to define it, you select the whole thing, and you should be fine. Now let's see if I did that right for this. I'm going to click on my chart, make sure that it's selected, right click, marker, instead of column, marker, and I want the rotor, just the rotor, click OK, and there I get my rotor. And I can change my line, I could put a gradient through this. There's just so many different things I can do in Illustrator to make this far more interesting. You can also get text to show up, the number indicators. I just don't want to take too much time for that, because I do want to make sure that I let you guys out. I keep going over. So here's the trick for this. If you want text to be interactively part of this, right? You just take a text box and you type in %00. And let me explain to you what those mean so that you'll be able to remember it. Sometimes if I have a reason why, I can remember the symbols better. So the % sign means, ooh, I don't want to use that. That worries me. I probably messed up these lids myself. So the % sign means whatever the number is in the data, that's what you're going to display above the chart. The zeros mean, the first zero says, and let me use another example. If I had had a 1, it would say, even if this number is 2135.6, it will only display one digit. 2 would display 2 digits. 0 says, I don't care how many digits there are, show them all. And the second 0 is for anything to the right of the decimal point. So in this case, it's just a 6, but it could be 625437, right? Now, in some cases, if you haven't truncated your data in something like Excel, you may have too many digits in front and in back to be really, that really turns people off, right? You see too many trailing digits, they're like, okay, I don't want to know what pi is, right? So, make sure that your data coming in is the way you want it, and then you won't have to worry about the 0, 0. But anyway, that's what it means, and that's why I'm getting these numbers. And even after doing that, I'm going to click on my chart and go to my data, and let's change 15 is just sitting so low there. Let's change that data, because that's why we change data, so it looks good, right? Exactly. And I'm going to click accept, and that went up. And the number is accurate. All right. When you are building your shapes and doing all those things, I want to go back to that file that we were just looking at, because I want to show you a couple of brand new features that might come in handy. The pencil tool has been completely re-engineered in this last version of the Creative Cloud. So if anyone ever tried to use the pencil tool before, you know that it was very difficult to use for any type of a drawing. And the reason for that is as you dragged, it would lay down anchor points everywhere. My poor little hand is making the slightest little shake. And even when I would use a Wacom tablet and a thing, I could still get right. And to try to modify these, anybody who's ever tried to modify anchor points would just look at this and say, absolutely not. But now, if you double-click the pencil tool, you can change the fidelity of it. So I'm going to drag it all the way to the right. make it smooth. And now when I draw an arc, look at that. Pretty cool. So people who just were shying away from the pen tool in the past, now they have another tool at their disposal to really put things together. And the other thing it will do is it will connect multiple lines. So notice that I place my cursor over this. There's a little line next to my pencil. That's telling me if you draw right now, you're going to connect that to the previous one. That's now a single shape. And I do it again. And this is all now one object. And I have to show you this file because it's just too cool. And I want to show you one other thing with this too. So this entire thing was done with, except for the text, was done with the pencil tool. Yeah, it wasn't me. It was definitely not me. But this is really addictive. So another really cool new feature is that we have live corners. So I'm just going to show you these two last features because I've got to let you go. So it used to be if you wanted to make a corner, you had to work a lot harder than you do today. Now I just select the object, whatever corner I want. Now in this case, the entire mountain is selected, and all these little widgets here, okay, are where I select to change the radius of a corner. And I can always go back and change it later, tomorrow, next week, a year from now. As I drag, notice that I just changed all of these corners at the same time. But I could have said, well, no, I just want that corner. Or I just wanted that corner. So you can have all kinds of fun with this. And if you just think about these basic shapes, I keep focusing on basic shapes. I'm going to just change the corner radius of that one. And if I was to try to draw a fan like that, that would have taken me far longer than just changing a corner. So just think in terms of shapes. In fact, sometimes I think people who are not necessarily don't consider themselves creative graphic artists are sometimes better at this because they're breaking things down into shapes, squares and circles and lines. All right, the other really exciting part, which is a brand new tool, it's not a new tool, it's a new implementation of the tool, is the fact that one of our old tools, which is way down underneath the pen tool, it's called the anchor point tool, and it's very distinctive because it looks like a little triangle with the bottom missing. This is the tool that we use to convert corners to smooth points, but now it has another purpose. I don't even need an object selected. I don't need to be over an anchor point, but if I just hover over the top of a path, notice I get that little archy symbol. Watch this. This is just so cool. So I've just increased the wind power, and now I want my hole to be able to accept that, so we're going to go to a larger size hole boat. And even more, which I was shocked at when I first started playing with this, this is not even a curve, right? But I can push this up, turn it into a curve, and if I hold down my shift key, it's now a proportional curve. Just by pushing, nudging, right? That's all I'm doing here is just nudging. That one's blowing too far, so it's hanging to the right. Looks like a little shark fin. Okay. Anyway, lots of really cool stuff in Illustrator. And the fact that you can place this into any resource, you can also rasterize it if you needed something rasterized for the web. So don't forget that you have that option too.